Wait, you're a Bears fan and you're not subscribed to my channel? Before this video starts, make sure to 1. Hit the subscribe button below to catch all Bears content right here on this podcast. 2. Hit the bell notification because you, my friend, are a diehard Bears fan. And 3. Like this video and tell all the Bears fans you know about the channel. Alright, that's better. Now that you're actually subscribed to the channel, make sure to bear down and enjoy this video.
Now this is a podcast all about Bears. You either cheering for this team or just pulling your hair. I like to take a minute, just sit right back and tell you how I became the #1 Bears fan.
That boy is Benny Hunter.
Cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic. People, this the intro. Sacramento, California, born and raised. And Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. So on today's episode of Keek on the Mic, I will be giving you guys my very first mock draft of the season. And truthfully, this all comes full circle for me because this podcast, Keek on the Mic, a Chicago Bears podcast, is about a year old now. And this is where I started last year by giving you guys a mock draft. So it all comes full circle for me. So once again, like always, thank you so much for the support you guys give to the channel. I really, really appreciate it. So going into the 2022 NFL draft, which would be Ryan Poles and head coach Matt Eberflus's first draft as a Chicago Bear head coach and GM, they are dealt with only 5 total draft picks, 1 in the second, 1 in the third, 2 5s, and a 6. Obviously, we have no first-round picks due to us trading up to get Justin Fields. So this is how I look at it, Bears fans. Justin Fields is our first-round pick this year as well, and I will absolutely take that. So obviously, also when you look at this year's draft, the Bears only have 2 draft picks in the first 4 rounds. So for Ryan Poles, his job is going to be trying to gain extra draft capital because, to be quite honest, he made it very clear that he wants to build through the NFL draft. It's going to be really hard for him to do that if you only have 5 draft picks to work with. So he's going to have to be creative in figuring out ways to gain more draft capital for the Chicago Bears for this upcoming draft. So I'm going to do my first mock draft for you guys today, and I am going to do mine with trades, trying to make it as realistic as possible. As always, make sure you guys comment down below in the comment section and let me know how you feel about my trades, how you feel about my picks. And you guys can even offer your mock draft in the comment section, and we can have a good time with this. So let's get cracking with this mock draft. So in round 2, I am going to trade back. When I look at the draft this year, there's really no scenario where I see the Chicago Bears actually trading up. We don't have a lot of draft capital, right? So I don't see the Chicago Bears trading up because we don't have that much draft capital. We need to try to gain draft capital. So I see the Chicago Bears trading back. And in my mock draft, I have the Bears trading pick 39 and next year's 4th to the Chargers for pick 49 and pick 81, which would give us an extra 3rd round pick. It would give us 3 picks in the top 100. And to me, that would put the Chicago Bears in very good shape to get some quality players that can be hopefully day 1 starters and contribute to the Chicago Bears right away. So after I trade back with my first pick, round 2, pick 49, I have the Chicago Bears selecting safety Jaquan Brisker out of Penn State. And if this scenario works out where we trade back and we're still able to get a quality player like safety Jaquan Brisker out of Penn State, I would be overjoyed as a Bears fan. This would be a huge win. Brisker has ideal size at 6'1", 200 pounds, and he is arguably the best safety in this year's draft. To me, at this position, if he drops that far, this would be an absolute steal. Do I think he will drop that far? I'm not sure. The draft can move in many different directions, but if he drops this far and we're able to pick him up, that would be a huge steal. Brisker has great length and athletic ability. He can play all over the field. Penn State like to use him in different spots. He was even comfortable playing up on the line of scrimmage. And this is what I like about him. He doesn't shy away from contact, and he doesn't miss very many tackles. You know who this is good for? It'd be really good for a guy like Eddie Jackson. If Eddie Jackson can go back to his free safety spot, I think Eddie Jackson makes that jump back to 2018 Eddie Jackson. For the last couple of years, the Chicago Bears have been shuffling their strong safeties. Getting a guy like Jaquan Brisker would end that. He would be a day one starter, and he would make the Chicago Bears secondary instantly better from the get-go. So if this situation happens for the Chicago Bears, it would be an absolutely huge win for them. Then we're moving on to round 3. Round 3, pick 71. I have the Chicago Bears selecting wide receiver George Pickens out of Georgia. Obviously, Pickens is 6'3", 201 pounds, and he would be an excellent option to pair up with a Darnell Mooney. And obviously, going into this offseason, we need receivers. Obviously, Allen Robinson's looking like he's on his way out. Darnell Mooney's the only receiver technically under contract for the Chicago Bears. So the Bears and Ryan Poles need to figure out ways to get some more receivers in the fold for this Chicago Bears offense. The only reason why I see George Pickens falling this far is because he did tear his ACL last spring, and then he came back and played 4 games this season and only had about 5 catches for 100 and something yards. He did make a really, really big 52-yard catch in the national championship game that kind of put him back on the map. So depending on what his draft workouts look like, his combine workouts look like, he could definitely move up. But there is also that possibility that Pickens, a guy like Pickens, is going to fall a little bit. This year's draft is deep at wide receiver, so it wouldn't surprise me if a guy like George Pickens falls. If he does fall to the 3rd round, I would run to the podium to pick George Pickens and draft him as a Chicago Bear. He has the ability to track deeper passes with relative ease, large catching radius. Having Pickens next to Darnell Mooney would give the Bears 2 young ascending wide receivers at the position, and I think that would set them up for years to come. And like I said in yesterday's video, I hope Ryan Poles doubles down at wide receiver, not only picking a receiver in the draft, but also pick a receiver up in free agency. All in all, I do expect the Chicago Bears to take a receiver in this year's draft, and I could be wrong. They could end up picking a receiver in the 2nd round. It just depends how this year's draft falls for the Chicago Bears. Obviously, we traded back in this first mock draft, so we gained an extra 3rd round pick. So in round 3, pick 81, I have the Chicago Bears selecting inside linebacker Henry To'oTo'o from Alabama. Henry To'oTo'o is 6'2", 225 pounds, so pretty good size. And this is the one thing I could say about Ryan Pace that he did a very poor job at. He did a very poor job at trying to pair inside linebacker next to Roquan Smith that can actually match Roquan's intensity, match Roquan's skill set. He just didn't really do a good job. Obviously, Danny Trevathan was there for a minute, but Danny Trevathan started getting older, started getting more injuries, so that didn't work out. Obviously, Alec Ogletree was a pretty good option, but I don't really see Alec Ogletree as a long-term option. I see him as maybe like a rotational piece. I think it's about time for the Chicago Bears, either in free agency or the draft, to get Roquan Smith a partner in crime that we can see for the next 10 years. So when you look at To'oTo'o, this would be a long-term solution for the Chicago Bears. He has exceptional sideline-to-sideline tackling as well as great coverage skills, and I think that's what kind of sets him apart from other linebackers is his coverage skills. He would plug in perfectly with the Bears defense due to his coverage skills and athletic ability. Plus, he already has played on this level of defense with Alabama, so he knows what it takes to be an elite defense. So obviously, any player that comes from Alabama has that NFL experience because they kind of almost play an NFL scheme. Obviously, Nick Saban came from the NFL. He's a really good coach in terms of college football. So you know what you're going to get out of this guy. And I think at this spot in the 3rd round, I think it's about time for the Chicago Bears and Ryan Poles to get Roquan Smith a partner in crime for years to come. So obviously we don't have a 4th round pick. So now we're going straight to the 5th round where we have 2 5th round picks. And this is where I go offensive line. And I know before I give you guys my picks, people are like, well, Keeg, why don't you get offensive line earlier in the draft? Which it could be an option. It just depends how things fall for the Chicago Bears. But I fully anticipate Ryan Poles addressing offensive line in free agency as well as the NFL draft. So in round 5 with pick 144, I have the Chicago Bears selecting center Alec Lindstrom out of Boston College. This would be kind of neat because obviously this is where Ryan Poles played his college football, was at Boston College. Lindstrom is 6'3", 298 pounds. Lindstrom will be able to come in right away and compete for a spot. Obviously, when you look at the Bears' offensive line this year, there's going to be a lot of shuffling. To me, Sam Mustipher needs to be replaced. I'm not saying that the Chicago Bears can't re-sign Sam Mustipher, but I think you need to bring in some more competition on the offensive line. And let's say Sam Mustipher beats him out, then yeah, plug him right in. But I don't think that's going to be the case. So I think Lindstrom would come in and compete to possibly start on the offensive line day one. Lindstrom is a smart player who could play center or guard at the pro level. And obviously protecting Fields is a huge priority, keeping him upright, make sure he can make all the throws. But establishing the run game is also a huge priority. If you can get the run game going, that would make Justin Fields' job easier. And this is where Lindstrom really has excelled and succeeded the most in college, is his run blocking. He's a very, very technical blocker who uses high-level footwork and hand placement to win his matchup. So, like I said, very smart player, and sometimes that's what you need. You need smart offensive linemen, and it's not always about pass blocking. Sometimes you want to get guys in here that can be really, really good run blockers. The good situation for the Chicago Bears here is not only can you address the offensive line in free agency, you already have your 2 tackles of the future in Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum, right? So you have your tackles taken care of. So now the Chicago Bears can really focus on interior offensive linemen, and I see them doing that here in round 5 with center Alex Lindstrom. Moving on to the second round 5 pick. Round 5 pick 148, I have the Chicago Bears selecting guard Josh Rivas out of Kansas State. So once again, we're going interior offensive lineman. I'm not sure what's going to happen with James Daniels, if they're going to bring him back. Obviously, there's a lot of mixed reviews about James Daniels. Obviously, when the Bears drafted him a couple of years back, he was regarded as one of the better interior offensive linemen in that draft. But like I said, he does have some mixed reviews. I would still re-sign James Daniels because I feel like he has been a consistent force on that offensive line. So you can still bring James Daniels back, but I still have the Chicago Bears addressing interior offensive lineman here in this draft or in free agency. So here we take Josh Rivas out of Kansas State. He's 6'6", 317 pounds. So this guy is a massive man. He's absolutely huge. Rivas has a very strong upper body and above average footwork. His lateral mobility is an area that we would probably have to improve on. He possesses a nice wide base. Rivas is a much better run blocker than a pass blocker. And I think that should be the goal, trying to get some guys that have that nastiness about them. I think when we drafted Tevin Jenkins, I think that's why so many Chicago Bears like the Tevin Jenkins pick, because he was a nasty offensive lineman. I think that's what we need. We need guys that are going to put the defenders on their back and put their face into the dirt, have that little chip on their shoulder, right? And I think Josh Rivas could bring that to the Chicago Bears just with the size alone and him being very, very strong in his upper body. With Josh Rivas, though, we do have to understand that he may be a project. You know, obviously he still has a lot to work on. I think he has that natural raw talent. He's a big guy, but I think this would be a development piece going forward for the Chicago Bears. So yes, he has the size and the strength that you would want in an offensive lineman, but he still needs to work on some things. So that would be up to the Chicago Bears to develop Josh Rivas, to hopefully plug him in to be part of a hopefully impressive Chicago Bears offensive line going forward. And the very last pick in this mock draft is round 6 at pick 185. I have the Chicago Bears taking cornerback Josh Jobe out of Alabama, another Alabama guy. I'm really comfortable taking Alabama guys because where they come from. And obviously, when you look at the Chicago Bears, there's nothing impressive about the cornerback room for the Chicago Bears. Kendall Vildor was pretty much terrible. Obviously, you have Jalen Johnson. Obviously, Thomas Graham played a couple of games, and he looked pretty impressive, so we should be kind of excited for Thomas Graham Jr., but we still need to see a little bit more. And I think the key is how are they going to use Thomas Graham Jr.? But I fully expect, along with offensive linemen, Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears are probably going to stress cornerback, not only in free agency, but in this year's draft. Obviously, we could go a lot higher with the cornerback for the Chicago Bears in this draft. We don't know. It just depends, once again, how the draft falls. But in my first mock draft, I had them taking a cornerback in round 6, Josh Jobe out of Alabama. He's 6'1", 194 pounds. So kind of a bigger corner. He plays physical and with good strength, plays with good body control along with low pad level for his size, and he is very aggressive in the run game. So that's the one thing that kind of attracted me to Josh Jobe, is that he's an aggressive corner. He doesn't shy away from the contact, and I think that would be a good add for the Chicago Bears. Even though would be a 6th round pick in this instance, I think he would be able to come in and compete. And in this case, wouldn't be too hard to believe, because when you look at the Chicago Bears cornerback room, that was an area of weakness in the Chicago Bears roster. So Ryan Poles needs to bring in some competition via free agency or via draft in the cornerback room to ensure that we can get our secondary a little bit better for this upcoming season. So this is my very first mock draft. Obviously, as we get closer to the draft, and obviously after I watch the combine and do a little bit more research, my mock draft may change. But if this is how it fell, I would be very content as a Chicago Bears fan with these picks. Most of these guys would be day one starters, and they would improve the team instantly. So as a fan, I would be very, very excited to add these quality of players to the Chicago Bears roster. So how do you guys feel about my mock draft? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Would you change a couple of picks? Let me know down below in the comment section. And like always, let me hear your mock draft. Put that in the comment section as well. I would love to hear who you guys will pick. Would you trade back? Would you trade up? Who would be your 2nd round pick? I would love to hear down below in the comment section. But before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content around the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms. Make sure you share this episode of Kick on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for all new Bears podcast right here on Kick on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and bear down.
Riding with Country Bear. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I be on it right. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic.